The spotlight sliced through the dim haze of the banquet hall like a confession no one wanted to hear. Riley's hand trembled on the microphone stand, her voice cracking mid-laughter as she recounted our first clumsy dance under Portland's relentless rain. But then her eyes locked on the woman in the front row, a performer from the open mic night we'd stumbled into months ago, all fire and forgotten promises. In that suspended breath before the applause could swell, Riley leaned down and kissed her, soft and deliberate, the kind of kiss that unravels a decade of shared sunrises into threads of doubt. I was 10 feet away, my fingers still curled around the stem of a half-empty wine glass, the tart bite of Pinot on my tongue turning to ash. The room held its collective inhale, forks hovering mid-air. But all I could hear was the echo of our vows exchanged in a quiet Vermont chapel, where maple leaves had carpeted the aisle like a promise of forever. Harper Ellis, that's me, 35, a landscape architect who designs gardens to outlast storms. Yet here I was, crumbling under the weight of a single spotlighted betrayal. Riley pulled back, her cheeks flushed not with joy but something rawer, like she'd just surfaced from a depth she'd hidden even from herself. The stranger smiled, oblivious or uncaring, but Riley's gaze found mine across the chasm, wide with a horror that mirrored my own shattering heart. The party didn't end, it hemorrhaged. Guests murmured excuses, slipping out like shadows fleeing dawn, while I stood rooted, the cool marble floor pressing up through my heels as if to anchor me against the tide of questions crashing in my chest. Why now, on this night we'd planned for months, catered with Riley's favorite crab cakes from the waterfront market, string lights woven through the rafters like the constellations we'd named our dreams after. Riley descended the stage in a daze, her emerald silk dress whispering against her legs, the one I'd chosen because it made her eyes glow like sea glass after a storm. "Harper," she whispered, reaching for my arm, but I stepped back, the wine glass finally slipping to shatter at our feet, red rivulets snaking across the floor like veins laid bare. She followed me to the coat check, her apologies tumbling out in fragments. It was nothing, a stupid impulse, the lights and the music, I swear. But words felt like smoke now, curling away before they could touch the wound. Outside, Portland's November drizzle painted the streets in silver, the neon glow of food trucks blurring into halos that mocked our fractured anniversary. I hailed a cab without looking back, the door slamming like a period at the end of our story, or so I thought. Riley's text lit up my phone through the night. "I'm sorry. Please. Let's talk." But dawn found me in our empty bed, the sheets still indented where she'd lain, her scent of lavender and salt lingering like a ghost unwilling to fade. In the days that followed, our home, a craftsman bungalow on the edge of the Willamette, with its wild rose arbor and kitchen island scarred from years of midnight baking, became a museum of what we'd lost. I moved through it mechanically, sketching half-hearted blueprints for clients who praised my visionary touch, while Riley packed a bag and vanished to her sisters in Seattle, leaving behind a note on the fridge. "I need to figure this out. For us. I love you. Love." The word mocked me from the magnetic poetry we'd assembled one lazy Sunday, now scattered like shrapnel across the steel door. Grief settled in my bones like the coastal fog that rolled in from Astoria, thick and unrelenting. I'd wake to the sound of rain pattering the skylight, reaching for her side of the bed only to grasp cold linen, the absence carving deeper each time. Friends rallied with casseroles and walks along the river, their sympathy a gentle tide. Lydia from the firm with her no-nonsense bob and endless chai lattes, urging me to let it breathe. Caroline, the barista who'd witnessed our first date at the corner cafe, slipping me extra scones with notes that read, "You're stronger than this storm." But strength felt like a lie when every corner of the city whispered Riley. The park bench where we'd carved our initials into damp bark. The bookstore aisle where she'd pulled me into a kiss amid stacks of dog-eared paperbacks. One evening, as twilight bled into the living room, I unearthed the photo album from the attic, its leather cover soft as a prayer. There we were. Riley at 26, all golden hour glow on a Savannah porch swing during her family's humid reunion, her laughter captured mid-bloom as she twirled me under Spanish moss. Me at 28, freckles blooming across my nose from a Montana hiking trip, her hand steady on my waist as we crested a ridge painted in wild lupin. The images blurred through tears I hadn't permitted until then, each page a testament to the woman who'd chosen me after years of her own quiet battles, coming out in a Bible Belt town that clung to secrets like kudzu. building a life with me brick by tentative brick. But that kiss on stage, it wasn't just betrayal. It was a flare from a fire I'd thought banked, revealing cracks in the foundation we'd both ignored. Riley had always carried a restlessness, a shadow from her past lovers who faded like summer fireflies. But I'd believed our love the anchor, steady as the evergreens lining our street. Now doubt rooted deep. Had I been enough? Or was I the safe harbor she'd outgrown? The questions looped like a reel in an old projector, flickering against the walls of my solitude. Weeks blurred into a fragile routine. I threw myself into work, transforming a neglected lot in the Pearl District into a sanctuary of ferns and reflecting pools, each placement a small act of resurrection. Yet at night, the house echoed with unspoken accusations. When Riley finally called, her voice a threadbare whisper across the miles, I listened from the porch swing, the phone pressed to my ear like a conch shell carrying distant waves. I'm coming back, she said, not a question but a plea. I need to explain. Not excuses, just the truth. I wanted to hang up, to let the line go dead like the embers of our trust, but something in her tone, the raw edge of unraveling, held me. Come home, I replied, the words tasting of salt and surrender. But this time no spotlights. Just us. She arrived at dusk, the gravel crunching under her rental car's tires like bones settling. Rain slicked her hair, plastering chestnut strands to her temples, and in her eyes, I saw the woman who'd once chased fireflies with me in Georgia fields, now hollowed by her own reckoning. We sat on the living room rug, a bottle of bourbon between us, her vice not mine, its amber glow catching the fire we'd lit in the hearth. No embraces, no recriminations at first, just silence heavy as the fog outside until she spoke. It wasn't about her, Harper. Or us. It was me. Falling back into that old pattern, chasing the rush to drown the quiet fears. Her fingers traced the rim of her glass, voice dipping low. The stage, the crowd. It reminded me of before you, when I'd performed to feel seen, to outrun the girl who grew up hiding who she loved. I nodded, throat tight, the wound still fresh but probing now, curious despite the ache. She'd grown up in Savannah's embrace, daughter of a shrimper whose calloused hands mended nets but couldn't grasp her truths. A mother who baked pecan pies with hymns on the radio. Coming out had been a quiet rupture, disowned whispers at family gatherings, nights spent in dive bars where the music drowned the loneliness. We'd met in Portland, me fresh from a Vermont firm with sketches of sustainable oases in my portfolio. Her headlining a folk open mic with songs that wove heartache into harmony. Our love had bloomed slow like moss on river rocks but solid. That night, confessions spilled like the bourbon we nursed. She admitted the restlessness had simmered for months, the pressure of our milestone, the way success in her songwriting had spotlighted insecurities she'd buried. The kiss? A desperate grab at validation, an echo of past selves she'd thought exorcised. I saw you watching, she murmured, tears carving paths down her cheeks. And it broke me more than anything. I reached then, tentative, my hand covering hers, the contact electric with forgiveness not yet earned but glimpsed, like sunlight piercing storm clouds. We didn't sleep together that night. Boundaries felt sacred now, fragile as new growth after fire. Instead, we talked until the embers died, mapping the fractures, not to mend hastily, but to understand their shape. Dawn found us curled on the couch, her head on my shoulder, the rhythm of her breath syncing with the distant hum of the city waking. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet. It was the first thread pulled toward weaving something stronger. But as she stirred, whispering my name like a vow renewed, I felt the stirrings of possibility, a garden not replanted, but tilled for what might yet bloom. The morning after her return unfolded like a tentative sketch, lines blurred where certainty once stood. Riley brewed coffee in our chipped mugs, the one with the lighthouse silhouette for her, the fern-etched one for me, its steam rising in lazy spirals that caught the slanted light through the kitchen window. She moved with a careful grace, as if the floorboards might splinter under her steps, and I watched from the table, nursing my own mug, the bitterness a mirror to the questions still churning. I booked a cabin, she said finally, sliding a plate of toast my way, butter glistening like unshed tears. Up the coast near Cannon Beach. Just for a week. Space to breathe. To start over if you'll let me. I traced the grain of the oak table, worn smooth from years of elbows and elbows worth of late-night confessions, and nodded. Space. The word had haunted our arguments in the months leading up to the anniversary. A phantom she'd invoked when song lyrics tangled in her notebook, when my deadlines pulled me into the soil and away from her melodies. Go, I replied, voice steady despite the hollow in my chest. But come back with more than echoes. She squeezed my hand then, brief as a heartbeat, before gathering her guitar case and duffel, the door clicking shut behind her like a pause in our symphony. Portland without her felt amplified in its solitude. The hawthorn branches scratching at the windows like unanswered pleas. The river's murmur through my evening runs a relentless underscore to the reel of that kiss replaying in my mind. Work became my refuge. I lost myself in the tactile poetry of earth, directing crews to layer compost over barren plots, watching green shoots pierce the dark like stubborn hopes. Lydia noticed the shadows under my eyes during our lunch at the food carts, her fork pausing mid-bite of falafel. You're tending everyone else's gardens, Harper. Who's watering yours? I shrugged, forcing a smile, but her words lingered, seeding doubt about the walls I'd built around my heart. Meanwhile, Riley's updates trickled in like rain on parched ground. Texts at odd hours, photos of haystack rock shrouded in mist, captions sparse. The waves don't judge. Found a trail that sings back. I resisted replying at first, letting the silence stretch as a test of her resolve, but one evening, a voice memo arrived, her guitar strumming softly beneath words that cracked open the door I'd bolted. I'm sitting on this driftwood log, Harper, and the ocean's telling me stories I need to share. About the girl I was before you, the one who kissed strangers to feel alive because love felt like a trap. But you were the key that unlocked it all. I'm sorry I turned the lock on you instead. Tears blurred the screen and I played it again, her voice weaving through the quiet house like smoke from a distant fire. That night I walked to the waterfront, the steel bridge's arches glowing against the indigo sky, and hurled pebbles into the Willamette, each splash a release of the bitterness I'd hoarded. Forgiveness wasn't a switch flipped. It was erosion, slow and inevitable, the river carving canyons from stone over time. Back home I pulled out my sketchpad, not for clients but for us. Doodles of intertwined roots resilient against frost, a map of what our life could be if we dared replant. Riley's week extended to 2, then 3, her calls growing longer, laced with the salt tang of coastal air and the vulnerability of unraveling. She described hikes through Sitka spruce groves, where ferns unfurled like secrets kept too long, and how the isolation had forced her to confront the mirror, not the polished performer, but the woman who'd fled intimacy's depths out of fear it might drown her. I wrote a song, she confessed one midnight, the line faint with exhaustion. Not for stages. For you. About the anniversary, the lights, the kiss, the way it gutted me to see your face. She hummed a fragment, melody haunting as foghorns, lyrics threading pain into plea. In the glare of what we built, I reached for shadows but your light was the home I forgot to claim. I flew up on impulse, renting a car at the Portland airport and driving the winding highway north, the ocean's roar building like a crescendo. Cannon Beach unfolded in grayscale splendor. Tide pools shimmering under overcast skies, gulls wheeling like punctuation marks in the wind. The cabin was a weathered A-frame nestled among dunes, chimney puffing wood smoke that smelled of pine and possibility. Riley stepped onto the porch as my tires crunched to a halt, her sweater oversized and sea-faded, eyes widening in that mix of joy and trepidation I'd fallen for a decade ago. We didn't rush to words, instead we walked the shore, boots sinking into wet sand, the horizon a blurred line where sea met sky. She handed me a notebook, pages filled with scrawled verses and pressed sea glass, her handwriting a familiar slant. This is the truth I owe you, she said, voice barely above the waves. No performances. Just me. We sat on a fallen log as twilight deepened, her reading aloud while I listened, the rhythm of her words syncing with the tide's pull. It was a confession in verse, the thrill of the stage masking a fear of stagnation, the kiss a reflex born of old wounds, her father's disapproval echoing in every applause, her mother's silent tears a chorus she tried to silence with strangers' touches. By firelight that night, bourbon replaced by chamomile tea steaming in pottery mugs, we peeled back layers long neglected. I spoke of my own shadows, the Vermont upbringing in a family of Stoics, where emotions were tilled under like fallow fields, leaving me ill-equipped for the tempests of love. I thought I could design us into perfection, I admitted, flames dancing in her hazel gaze. But gardens thrive on chaos too, winds that bend but don't break. Her hand found mine across the hearthrug, fingers lacing with a gentleness that spoke of bridges rebuilding, plank by plank. The drive back to Portland the next day was a quiet communion. Her playlist of folk tunes, Joni Mitchell's yearning chords, Brandi Carlile's resilient anthems, filling the cab like incense. We arrived home as dusk settled, the bungalow welcoming us with its familiar creaks, and for the first time in months, the air felt less like a battlefield and more like a shared breath. That night we cooked together, her chopping onions for risotto, me stirring arborio with whispers of plans. Therapy sessions in the city, weekends escaping to the mountains, songs she'd write not for escape but embrace. Sleep came side by side, her warmth a tentative anchor, and in the half-light of morning, I traced the curve of her shoulder, feeling the first fragile shoots of trust pushing through the soil of our scars. Yet healing isn't linear. It's a spiral dipping back into depths before ascending. A week later, at a low-key open mic in a Northeast dive, Riley took the stage unbidden, her set a raw elegy to our fracture. I watched from the bar, heart in my throat, as she poured out verses of betrayal and redemption, the crowd leaning in like conspirators. When she dedicated the Closer to Me, for Harper who stayed when I wandered, and our eyes met across the smoke-hazed room, applause erupted, but it was her small, tear-bright smile that sealed something irrevocable. We left hand in hand, the night air crisp with autumn's promise, and in that moment the wound began to scar, not a blemish but a testament to survival. Winter crept in on the heels of that night, frosting the bungalow's windows with intricate lace that mimicked the fragile patterns we'd begun to weave anew. Riley and I settled into a rhythm tentative as new snow mornings shared over oatmeal laced with cinnamon from her Savannah childhood. Afternoons where I'd retreat to my drafting table, while her guitar murmured from the sunroom. Therapy became our weekly pilgrimage, a sunlit office in the Alphabet District where Dr. Elena Voss, no relation, though the coincidence amused Riley, listened with the steady gaze of an old oak, her questions gentle probes into the loam of our shared history. It was there in the third session that Riley first named the ghost haunting her impulses. Clara, a flame-haired musician from her early 20s, whose whirlwind romance in Atlanta's underground scene had ended in a crash of infidelities and unspoken needs. She was chaos, Riley confessed, twisting a tissue in her lap, but it felt like freedom, until it hollowed me out. I sat across from her, the armchair's cushions yielding like empathy itself, and for the first time jealousy didn't flare. Instead, understanding bloomed, a quiet fern uncurling. Clara wasn't a rival but a relic, a shard of Riley's youth that had cut deep enough to scar her capacity for stillness. Emboldened, we planned a road trip south, tracing the spine of the Cascades toward Crater Lake, where volcanic depths cradled sapphire waters under perpetual snow. The drive wound through passes blanketed in white, evergreens bowed under the weight like penitents, and Riley's playlist shifted to softer strains. Phoebe Bridgers' ethereal ache, Lucy Dacus' tender resolve, mirroring the thaw in our silences. At a roadside diner near Bend, fogged windows beating with condensation, she slid a mixtape across the Formica table, its cover hand-drawn with intertwined vines. Road songs, she said, cheeks pink as the dawn beyond, for the miles we've yet to cover. The lake revealed itself at midday, a caldera of impossible blue ringed by rimrock, the air crisp with the scent of pine resin and frozen earth. We hiked the West Rim Trail, boots crunching through crusty snow, her laughter echoing when I slipped on an icy patch, pulling her down with me in a tumble of powder and giggles. There, amid the vast silence broken only by wind-whipped firs, she turned to me, breath visible in the chill. This place. It's like us. Born from fire holding water now. Deep enough to drown doubts. Her gloved hand cupped my face and we kissed, not with the urgency of reconciliation, but the slow certainty of roots finding purchase. Back in Portland, spring's heralds arrived with erratic grace. Crocuses thrusting violet heads through garden beds I'd mulched in winter's grip, cherry blossoms shedding petals like confetti on the sidewalks. Riley's songwriting flourished, no longer solitary but collaborative. She'd hum refrains while I weeded, and I'd suggest metaphors drawn from soil and stone, our evenings alive with the scratch of her pen and the glow of desk lamps. One such night, as rain pattered the roof like impatient fingers, she debuted a full piece at our kitchen table. Title scrawled in looping script, Ember's Edge. It chronicled the anniversary's blaze. Not as destruction, but ignition, verses charting the burn to barren ground and the green resurgence after. I listened, fork paused over Pasta Primavera, her voice weaving vulnerability into velvet. Spotlight thief in the heart of our vow/lips borrowed from shadows, but the debt was mine now/you stood in the wreckage, roots in the clay/teaching this wanderer the worth of stay. Tears pricked my eyes, not from sorrow but recognition. The song a bridge from her chaos to our constancy. When she finished, silence held us like an embrace, until I rose and pulled her close, our foreheads touching, breaths mingling in the steam of cooling plates. That's us, I whispered. Not perfect but growing. Yet shadows lingered, testing our graft. A call from Savannah shattered a lazy Sunday, her mother voice frail over the line, revealing a diagnosis. Early-stage lymphoma, the kind that creeps like kudzu through good veins. Riley's face drained of color, phone slipping from her grip as she sank to the floor, the weight of estranged years crashing down. She wants me there, she murmured, eyes distant as the Georgia horizon. For treatments. For whatever's left. I knelt beside her, arms encircling the tremor in her frame, the decision unspoken but inevitable. We flew east 2 days later, the Delta flight carrying us over the Appalachians into the humid cradle of her youth. Savannah enveloped us like an old letter, creased and scented with salt marsh and magnolia. Its oak-lined squares whispering histories Riley had both cherished and fled. Her mother's home, a shotgun cottage on the edge of Forsyth Park, azaleas rioting in pinks and whites, stood sentinel, paint peeling like forgotten apologies. Eleanor Voss, silver threading her once auburn braid, met us on the porch, her embrace for Riley fierce and fleeting, a nod to me laced with cautious warmth. You've kept her whole, she said softly, eyes tracing the lines of my face, when I couldn't. The weeks blurred into a tapestry of hospital vigils and porch swings, for drips beeping counterpoint to Riley's hummed lullabies from childhood. I wandered the historic district while she sat bedside, sketching squares reborn as pocket gardens, the wrought iron balconies dripping ferns like verdant tears. One afternoon, in the dappled shade of a live oak, Riley found me on a bench near the river, her steps heavy with the day's revelations. She told me stories today, she said, settling beside me, the bench creaking under our weight. About Dad, how he loved fiercely but feared difference. How she stayed silent to keep the peace, but it cost her peace. Her hand sought mine, fingers cool from the nurse's station. I see it now, Harper. That kiss. It was me echoing her silence, grabbing at noise to fill the quiet hurts. We walked the factoried waterfront as dusk gilded the spires, her arm linked through mine, the Savannah River's murmur a balm to raw edges. That night, after Eleanor's morphine-laced sleep claimed her, Riley and I slipped into the backyard, fireflies pulsing like errant stars among the palmettos. She pulled out her guitar, borrowed from a cousin's attic, and played a medley, old hymns twisted with her folk infusions, verses of parting and return. Midway, her mother stirred from her chair, blanket slipping, and joined in faltering soprano, the three of us a fragile chorus under the moon. It was absolution unspoken, a mending of threads across generations, and in Riley's tear-streaked smile, I saw the woman she'd always been, resilient, reaching. Eleanor's treatment stretched into summer, remissions flickering like fireflies themselves, bright, then dim. Riley balanced vigils with songwriting and stolen hours, her notebook filling with odes to this low-country limbo. Moss on the branches, heavy as regret / but roots run deeper, pulling life from the wet. I tended the cottage garden, coaxing heirloom tomatoes from clay soil amended with compost, each fruit a small victory against entropy. One sweltering evening, as cicadas thrummed the air thick, Eleanor pulled Riley aside in the kitchen, their voices low over cooling sweet tea. "Forgive yourself, child," she said, hand on Riley's cheek. "Love isn't a stage. It's the audience that stays." Riley emerged hollowed but lighter, collapsing into my arms on the glider, sobs racking her like thunder. Through it all, our love deepened, not in grand gestures but the quiet scaffolding of presence. my thumb tracing circles on her palm during chemo waits, her surprise sketches of Portland plots pinned to the fridge like beacons home. When remission held firm enough for discharge, we lingered a week more, driving coastal byways where dunes met Atlantic foam, Riley's hand in mine over the gearshift. "Thank you," she whispered at a pullout overlooking Tybee Island, waves crashing like applause unearned, "for holding the map when I lost the way." I leaned across the console, kissing her temple, salt lingering on her skin. "We're the map now. Drawn together." Return to Portland brought autumn's palette, maples aflame along the streets, harvest markets brimming with pumpkins and pears. The bungalow welcomed us with its hearth-ready hearths, and Riley dove into a local showcase, her set a culmination. Songs of Fracture and Forge, dedicated to the women who mended me, mother and wife. The crowd, intimate in a converted warehouse, leaned into her truths, and when she stepped off stage, guitar slung over shoulder, I met her in the wings, our kiss a seal on the journey's bend. Not endpoint but waypoint, toward whatever caldera awaited, blue and boundless. Fall deepened into a golden hush, leaves carpeting the bungalow's yard like a quilt stitched from our evolving story. Riley's return to the stage felt less like performance and more sacrament, her voice carrying the timbre of trials weathered. Savannah's humid confessions, Portland's rainy rebirths. We hosted a small gathering in the garden one crisp October eve, lanterns strung through the rose arbor casting pools of light on faces dear. Lydia with her latest architectural renderings, Caroline bearing pies from the cafe's fall specials, even a surprise video call from Eleanor, her color returning like dawn to the Lowcountry. Riley played unplugged, fingers dancing over frets to tunes that wove our threads. Verses of betrayals bite softened by forgiveness's bloom, choruses lifting like smoke from the fire pit. In the quiet after, as embers glowed and guests drifted homeward, she turned to me amid the leaf-strewn patio, her hazel eyes reflecting the stars pricking the ink-black sky. "This," she said, gesturing to the flickering warmth, the half-empty wine glasses, "it's what I almost lost. What I want to build forever." Her words hung vulnerable as the first frost, and I drew her close, our breaths mingling in the chill, the kiss that followed tasting of cider and certainty. That night, tangled in sheets scented with wood smoke, we mapped futures, not blueprints rigid as my old designs, but fluid as river bends. A joint studio where her songs could echo my sketches, trips to Vermont's sugaring season, perhaps even whispers of family forged from chosen kin. Winter's solstice brought its own illuminations. We escaped to the Oregon coast again, this time to a lighthouse keeper's cottage near Newport, where Yuckwina Head's beam swept the horizon like a heartbeat in the dark. Storms lashed the windows, waves hurling foam against basalt cliffs, and in that elemental roar, Riley shared fragments of a new project. A concept album titled Tidal Reckoning, tracks charting the pull between impulse and anchor. "It's you in every measure," she confessed over cocoa by the fire, her feet tucked under my thigh on the threadbare sofa, the steady line beneath the swells. I listened, sketching idly on a napkin, the lighthouse as metaphor, its light-piercing fog to guide wanderers home. But renewal's path twisted, as all true paths do. January's gray veil lifted to reveal an offer. A residency for Riley at a folk collective in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, 6 weeks of immersion with songwriters from across the South. "It's a chance to hone this," she said, album-proof spread across the kitchen island, "but only if it feels right for us." Doubt flickered, echoes of past departures, the stage's siren call, but we weighed it together, therapy's tools at hand. Pros in her creative fire, cons in the miles between. "Go," I decided, tracing her knuckles. "Write the songs that heal us both. I'll visit, and we'll let the distance distill what's true." She departed in February's thaw, the airport farewell a soft ache. Her duffel slung over shoulder, my scarf wrapped around her neck against Asheville's mountain chill. Texts bridged the gap. Photos of misty trails through rhododendron thickets, snippets of lyrics born in cabin jams. Appalachian roots run deep like ours, twisted but tenacious. I threw myself into a commission, a community garden in southeast Portland, raised beds for elders and youth to sow side by side, each planting a prayer for continuity. Lydia partnered on the irrigation, her pragmatic humor a steadying force. "Loves like these drip lines, Harper, slow seep, not flood." Midway through her stay, I flew east, the red eye depositing me in the cradle of those ancient peaks, air pine-sharp and laced with wood smoke. The collective sprawled across a hillside homestead near Black Mountain, cabins clustered like notes on a staff, bonfires crackling nightly with shared verses. Riley met me at the gravel lot, her cheeks flushed from a morning hike, and led me to a overlook where the range unfolded in undulating blues, valleys cradling fog like secrets. "Listen," she urged, pulling a recorder from her pocket, playing a demo track. Fiddle-laced lament rising to hopeful refrain, words evoking our anniversary's shatter and the grace that followed. From stage-lit fracture to mountains men slash your hand in mine, the truest end. We spent days entwined in exploration, drives along the parkway, stops at fiddlers' conventions where banjos twanged like heartstrings, evenings in her cabin where she'd strum originals, my head on her lap, fingers combing through my hair. One dusk, amid a circle of fellow artists around the fire, she debuted Tidal Reckoning's title cut, voice steady as the flames. Waves crash confession on reluctant shore slash but in the undertow, I find my core slash your light the beacon, pulling me toward slash the harbor we hewed from the storm's hard pour. The group hushed, then erupted in murmurs of resonance, but it was her glance my way, raw reverent, that bound the moment eternal. Return to Portland in March brought cherry blossoms in riot, petals swirling like celebratory confetti. Riley's residency yielded not just tracks but transformation. She spoke of the mountain's lessons, humility in their scale, harmony in communal song, infusing our days with a deepened attunement. We redesigned the sunroom into a creative nexus. Her corner with acoustic panels and lyric boards, mine with drafting easel and potted succulents, the space between a shared drafting table for collaborations. One afternoon, as sun slanted golden through the panes, she sketched a melody while I plotted a victory garden for the album's launch. Edible blooms symbolizing sustenance from strife. Spring's vigor mirrored our own. Eleanor's checkups glowed positive, her calls laced with laughter over garden plots she'd started in Savannah, inspired by my photos. "Tell that wife of yours she's got green in her soul," she'd tease, and Riley would beam, phone on speaker as we weeded together. Yet intimacy's rebirth asked patience. Nights found us tracing scars, not just emotional, but the faint lines of time on skin, stories etched in stretch marks from hikes and hugs. "You're my constant," she'd murmur in the half-light, lips brushing collarbone, our love-making a slow unfurling, reverent as dawn over dunes. By May, Tidal Reckoning neared completion, demos pulsing from her laptop like vital signs. We hosted a listening party in the backyard, string lights twinkling against twilight, friends gathered on blankets with craft brews and charcuterie. Riley cued the tracks, her hand in mine as narratives unfolded. Opener a raw recount of the kiss's quake, closer a luminous vow of vigilance. Gasps and nods rippled through the group, Lydia wiping eyes with her sleeve, Caroline toasting with raised glass. To the music that mends. As the final chord faded, Riley pulled me to my feet, dancing slow in the grass to Cricket's chorus, whispering, "This is our soundtrack now. Forward always." Summer solstice crowned it all. The album's release coincided with our belated anniversary redo. A private affair at a coastal inn near Seaside, bonfire on the beach, waves lapping like applause. We renewed informal vows under a driftwood arch, words simple as sea glass. To the storms we've sailed, the lights we've lit. That night, as stars wheeled overhead, her head on my chest, heartbeat syncing with the tide, I felt the journey's arc complete. Not endpoint but apogee, poised for whatever crescents lay ahead. Summer unfurled in lazy abundance, the bungalow's garden a riot of zinnias and cosmos bowing under bees' drowsy hum. Tidal Reckoning rippled outward, garnering quiet acclaim. Podcast features praising its visceral intimacy, streams climbing like vines on a trellis. Riley navigated the glow with grounded grace. Interviews conducted from our porch swing, her responses laced with our story's essence. Healing isn't solo. It's the harmony you find in letting another hold the melody. I watched her bloom, pride swelling like sun-warmed earth, yet mindful of the stage's subtle pull, the way spotlights could summon old phantoms. To anchor us, we committed to rituals. Weekly forest baths in Forest Park, trails threading fern-choked gullies where she'd hum unreleased refrains. I'd point out salal berries ripening like rubies. One such hike in July's dappled heat, She paused at a cascade tumbling over moss-slick rocks, pulling a wildflower crown from her pack, daisies and yarrow woven loose. "For the queen of my quiet revolutions," she teased, perching it on my head. And we laughed, splashing bare feet in the pool, water cool as memory's first touch. These moments wove resilience into routine, threads of joy stitching over seams once frayed. August brought a curve. An invitation for Riley to headline a women's music festival in the Montana Badlands near Bozeman, a 3-day affair amid sagebrush seas and cottonwood groves. "It's exposure," she said over breakfast burritos, maps spread like a promise, "but we'd go together. Make it ours." Excitement tempered caution, memories of stages past, but this felt different, a celebration of sisterhood, not spectacle. We packed the truck with tent and cooler, driving north through passes where hawks wheeled on thermals, the drive a prelude to plains unfolding vast as possibility. The festival sprawled across a ranch valley, stages makeshift from hay bales, air thick with sage and sunscreen, voices rising in polyphonic praise. Riley's set slotted for sunset on the main riser, golden light gilding the buttes like a frame from an old western. Backstage, amid fiddles tuning and hugs from fellow performers, a queer chorus from Seattle, banjo-strumming elders from the res, she turned to me, nerves flickering like fireflies. "Play with me?" she asked, extending her guitar pick, and I nodded, heart quickening. No pro, but harmonies were our language after all. As the sun dipped, casting long shadows over the crowd, women of all stripes swaying, flags and rainbow prisms, Riley took the stage, her sundress fluttering like a banner. She opened with Tidal Reckoning's Heart, voice soaring clear, then beckoned me up for the closer. An acoustic duet we'd rehearsed by lamplight, my tentative strums underscoring her lead. In the wide of the wild, where the heart goes to mend / we pitch our tents gainst the wind's wild intend / your voice the ridge line, my unfailing friend. The audience joined the refrain, 1,000 voices braiding into one, and in that swell I glimpsed her fully reborn, not the wanderer who'd kissed shadows, but the woman who'd claimed her light. Post-set, we wandered the afterglow. Food trucks dispensing bison burgers and huckleberry pie, drum circles pulsing under star-pricked skies. A young fan approached, notebook clutched, eyes wide. "Your story in that song, it gave me courage to tell my girlfriend." Riley knelt to her level, signing with a flourish. "Courage is contagious. Pass it on." Later, in our tent pitched on a bluff, canvas walls whispering with night winds, we lay entwined, her fingers tracing constellations on my skin. "That was us up there," she murmured. "Not just me." Dawn broke with birdsong, and as we broke camp, the Badlands seemed less barren, more a canvas of quiet triumphs. September's harvest moon heralded deeper roots. Eleanor's full remission arrived like a benediction, celebrated with a cross-country video feast. Savannah shrimp boils mirrored in our Portland grill-out, her laughter crackling through speakers as Riley strummed toasts. Emboldened, we broached expansion, fostering a rescue pup from the shelter, a wiry mutt named Sage with eyes like Riley's, wary but warming. Her antics filled the house with chaos joyful. Shredded socks as percussion, midnight zoom eyes chasing shadows away. "Family," Riley said one evening, Sage curled between us on the rug. "It's the mess that makes it." Work intertwined our worlds. My firm landed a contract for a queer-inclusive community center in the Pearl, green spaces designed for gathering and grace. Riley contributed soundscapes, acoustic nooks for open mics, and we'd collaborate late, blueprints beside lyric sheets, coffee fueling fevered ideas. Lydia dubbed us the Dream Team, her eye roll affectionate, while Caroline supplied endless lattes, dubbing the project Harper's Haven with a harmony. Groundbreaking fell on equinox, earth turned under goldenrod glow, Riley's impromptu verse sealing the first sod. From soil turned tender, stories take flight / roots in the ready, reaching for light. October wove intimacy's richer hues. We escaped to Vermont for foliage's peak, driving leaf-choked roads to the chapel of our vows, now a B&B draped in ivy. Owners, a lesbian couple who'd hosted our wedding, welcomed us with cider and tales of their own long haul. In the loft suite, overlooking valleys of flame in crimson and gold, Riley unpacked a gift. A leather-bound journal, its pages pre-filled with prompts. What anchors you? Where do we bloom next? We filled it by firelight, entries alternating. My musings on sustainable loves, her odes to enduring chords. One night, rain lashing panes, she read aloud a passage. 10 years from fracture, 20 to forge, our love a ballad without end. Tears mingled with kisses, bodies rediscovering rhythms patient as seasons. November's chill prompted nesting. Holiday lights strung early, Sage's first Thanksgiving turkey beg denied. Letters to Eleanor planning a joint Yuletide. Riley's follow-up EP Rich Echoes dropped to acclaim, tracks from Montana infused with our duet spirit. A radio spot brought her voice into kitchens nationwide. But she grounded it with us. Performances local, proceeds to women's shelters. One such gig, a cozy venue in Alberta Arts, she dedicated a set to the healer in my harmony, pulling me on stage for whispers shared into mics, crowd melting into our private world. As winter loomed, we stood on the back porch, breath fogging in tandem, Sage at our heels. This year, Riley said, arm around my waist. It's not survival, it's sovereignty. I leaned into her, the city lights twinkling like distant approvals, feeling the arc of her journey complete in ours. From stage-kissed shadows to this steadfast glow. Not flawless but fertile soil turned, seeds sown, ready for whatever rains might come. December draped Portland in silver filigree, street lamps haloed by occasional snow that dusted the bungalow like powdered sugar on gingerbread. We flew to Savannah for the holidays, Sage kenneled with Caroline's watchful eye, the flight a cocoon of shared playlists and dozing heads on shoulders. Eleanor greeted us at the airport, friendlier but fierce, her hug enveloping Riley like low-country tides. The cottage brimmed with Yule cheer, wreaths of magnolia leaves, a tree strung with heirloom ornaments glinting like captured fireflies. Over gumbo simmering with andouille and okra, stories flowed. Eleanor's tales of shrimping dawns, Riley's mountain melodies, my Vermont winters white as fresh starts. New Year's dawned mild, azaleas hinting green against the year's turn. We rang it in on River Street, cobblestones slick underfoot, fireworks blooming over the water like celestial applause. Riley and I slipped away to a quiet balcony overlooking the marsh, champagne flutes clinking as midnight chimed. To rebirths, she toasted, eyes reflecting pyrotechnic sparks, and we kissed slow, the crowd's roar fading to our private crescendo. Back home, Eleanor gifted us a quilt piece from her mother's linens, patches of faded florals and sailcloth, each square a whisper of endurance. Wrap yourselves in it, she said, voice thick. It's held storms before. January's return north carried that warmth, the quilt folded in our luggage like talisman. Portland welcomed with its reliable gray, but we pierced it with plans. A spring tour for Riley's full album, stops curated intimate, house concerts in Seattle lofts, vineyard sets in Walla Walla. I joined where circuits allowed, my own projects blooming. A rooftop oasis for a non-profit, pollinator havens buzzing with purpose. Sage greeted our homecomings with ecstatic spins, her joy a mirror to ours, tail wagging like a metronome to healing speed. February thawed into tentative buds, and with it a milestone. Our 11th anniversary, marked not by banquets but a pilgrimage to the coast. We rented a yurt in Oswald West, redwoods towering like ancient guardians, the surf's lullaby lulling us to sleep. By day we foraged tide pools, starfish clinging to rocks like stubborn hopes, anemones waving tentative welcomes. Evenings by the propane lantern, Riley unpacked her guitar, improvising ballads of the bay. Crab shells cracked on the strand's edge, keen/echo the breaks we've mended clean. One night as bioluminescence danced in the waves, she proposed a ritual. Letters to our past selves, buried in the dunes with a bottle of sand from Savannah. Mine read, "You designed beauty in broken ground. Trust the growth." Hers, "The stage was a mirror, not a mask. Step into the light you lit." March's equinox brought collaborations fruit. The community center's opening, a ribbon cut under cherry petals, green roofs alive with herbs and art. Riley performed the dedication, her set weaving attendees into song. Elders harmonizing on refrains, youth drumming beats of belonging. Lydia's speech lauded our synergy. Harper plants the possible, Riley sings it alive. Post-ceremony, in the sculpture garden I'd edged with lavender, we stole a moment, her forehead to mine. "This place, it's us writ large," she said. "Sanctuary sown from shared soil." Spring accelerated into verdant haste. Riley's tour a whirlwind of warm welcomes. Sold-out lofts where fans lingered for stories, not selfies. Encores that blurred into sing-alongs of solidarity. I met her in Boise for a leg. The Snake Rivers bend a scenic echo of our twists. Offstage, we hike city trails, her hand in mine, discussing futures fluid. Perhaps a cabin in the Cascades for retreats. Adoptions pondered over diner pie. Kids, she'd muse, eyes soft. Little ones to teach the tunes and trowels. The idea rooted, tentative as seedlings. April showers gifted rainbows arching over the Willamette. And with May's bloom, Eleanor's visit. A 2-week stay, flights funded by album royalties. She arrived wide-eyed at Portland's vibrancy, the bungalow's nooks delighting her. Sage's enthusiastic greetings, the sunroom's dual desks. We toured my sights. Victory Gardens thriving, her fingers tracing petals with wonder. You've built more than houses here, she told me over tea. You've built her home. Evenings, she'd join Riley's practice sessions, her alto blending in hymns reimagined folk. A trinity of voices mending generational rifts. June solstice crowned renewal. Tidal Reckoning earned a niche award. Indie Folk Album of the Year. Celebrated low-key at a rooftop bar, skyline twinkling approbation. Riley's acceptance, via video from our porch, credited, the woman who held the harmony when I faltered. Back home we danced to the album's tracks in the living room. Sage circling like a furry chaperone, laughter bubbling free. That night, under sheets scented with garden earth, she traced my spine. 11 years Harper. From shatter to shine. Summer's zenith brought expansion's first steps. Fostering turned permanent, Sage joined by a littermate, Juniper. A sleek greyhound mix with a penchant for sunbeams. The duo transformed chaos into chorus. Their romps in the yard soundtracking our days. Riley penned a children's sweet-inspired, whimsical verses of pups and perseverance, while I designed a dog-friendly park addendum to the center, agility mazes amid wildflowers. As August waned, we crested a quiet peak. A vow renewal in Vermont, intimate as our first, chapel aglow with lanterns, maple leaves confetti anew. Witnesses few, Lydia officiating with rye vows, Caroline baking the cake, Eleanor's presence via heartfelt letter. Under those same stars we exchanged rings reforged, inscriptions etched. From depths we rise. The afterdance spilled to a bonfire. Fiddles from Riley's tour mates lilting into night. Our sway slow, world narrowing to heartbeats thrum. September harvested abundance. Tour wrap-ups in sold-out halls. Album platinum in indie circles. We donated proceeds to healing hubs, LGBTQ centers, cancer funds, turning personal grace outward. October's foliage mirrored our fullness. A leaf-peeping drive to the gorge, Multnomah Falls misting our faces like blessings. November's gratitude circle closed the year. A potluck with kin chosen, Sage and Juniper underfoot. Riley's acoustic set sealing thanks. As winter whispered in, we stood on the porch, quilt draped over shoulders, city lights a constellation of conquests. Her journey, I murmured, arm around her waist, became ours. She turned, hazel eyes luminous. And the light? It's just beginning. In that shared breath, against the chill's gentle bite, we stepped forward, not from pain's shadow, but into dawn's embrace, ready for the gardens yet to grow.